Imagine a man surviving a catastrophic hurricane by riding 2,000 miles of turbulent ocean in a sealed coffin, after he was already dead. The man supposedly inside that box was Charles Coghlan, a celebrated 19th century stage actor. According to popular lore, a crystal gazer made a chilling prediction when Coghlan was young. He would die in the American South, but his spirit would never rest until his body was returned to his beloved summer home on Prince Edward Island. This poetic alignment of fate makes for a great headline, but the records left behind in the wake of the hurricane suggest this miracle was actually constructed one faulty memory at a time. Coghlan passed away in Galveston, Texas in late 1899. His family placed him in a heavy, lead-lined casket inside a granite receiving vault at the local cemetery until he could be moved. 9 months later, the Great Storm of 1900 swallowed Galveston Island. A massive storm surge crushed the cemetery, shattering stone vaults and sweeping dozens of caskets out into the Gulf of Mexico. His story might have faded into history, if not for this man, Robert Ripley. In the year 1929, he published a widely syndicated Ripley's Believe It or Not cartoon that made Coghlan a global sensation. This map shows the exact claim Ripley made, that Coghlan's coffin drifted out of the Gulf of Mexico, caught the Gulf Stream around Florida, and traveled exactly 2,000 miles north to wash ashore on Prince Edward Island, right where he always wanted to be. Millions of people accepted this as fact. But for an urban legend to be this specific, you have to wonder if the physical evidence from the storm's aftermath actually supports a single detail of the journey. To test that story, we have to look past the supernatural elements and examine the brutal physical reality of the hurricane itself. The 1900 Galveston Hurricane killed an estimated 8,000 people. It remains the deadliest natural disaster in United States history. Winds exceeding 140 miles per hour and a 12-foot tidal surge completely leveled thousands of buildings, reducing the city's infrastructure to floating rafts of timber. Lakeview Cemetery was in the direct path of this surge. Those massive rafts of debris slammed into the burial grounds, acting as battering rams that crushed the brick and granite vaults. Coghlan's coffin was certainly washed away in the chaos. But the 2,000-mile theory ignores a basic material fact. His casket was lead-lined and sealed inside a heavy iron outer shell. This diagram shows how ocean surface currents operate. An object needs substantial buoyancy to catch a ride on the Gulf Stream. A thick metal box is simply too dense to ride surface streams. It would quickly drop to the seafloor. The legend gives us a neat, poetic fantasy where the ocean acts as a personal courier. The reality of a Category 4 hurricane is bound by chaotic, unforgiving physics. The physical impossibility of the voyage is only the first contradiction. The legend claims Coghlan was returning to his birthplace, but records show he was born in Paris, not Prince Edward Island. This geographical error traces back to Coghlan's grieving friend, Sir Johnston Forbes Robertson. Decades after the storm, he published a memoir where he recorded a rumor that the actor's coffin had drifted back to his Canadian home. Soon after, another peer, actress Lily Langtry, published her own autobiography. She took the rumor and added the detail of a crystal gazer predicting the exact location of his final rest. When people lose a loved one to a senseless tragedy, memory often reconstructs facts into a story that feels more meaningful. Through these memoirs, a horrific natural disaster was rewritten into a purposeful, mystical narrative. The actual fate of Charles Coghlan's remains is documented in the historical record, and it doesn't involve international ocean travel. In January 1907, a group of hunters finally located his encrusted coffin. This map shows where they found him. He was partially submerged in a muddy Texas marsh, just 9 miles from the Galveston Cemetery. Zooming out, that 9-mile drift is an invisible speck compared to the sprawling 2,000-mile voyage the myth claims he took. Even when Coghlan's own sister demanded a retraction, Robert Ripley refused. His syndicated empire had already printed the tale, and the legend was simply too lucrative to correct. The reality wasn't buried by the Atlantic Ocean. It was intentionally suppressed by publishers who knew a profitable story when they saw one. Following the storm, the survivors in Galveston faced an unimaginable reality. They lived in surplus army tents on the shoreline, forced to build funeral pyres to burn thousands of bodies they couldn't bury. There was no deeper meaning to the devastation. The floating coffin myth offered something the actual hurricane completely lacked: a sense of purpose. Psychologists note that when people face trauma on this scale, they often invent narratives that suggest order. If a man's casket can fulfill its destiny across an angry ocean, it implies that the world is governed by fate rather than random violence. When we encounter a story where the impossible happens for a perfectly poetic reason, we are usually looking at a defense mechanism, the human mind seeking out order in a world that can feel terrifyingly chaotic. Sometimes the stories we invent to survive a tragedy are more powerful than the truth itself.